3 months after burying my father, I drove up to his cabin to scatter his ashes by the lake. Instead, I found HOA President Delilah Thornfield hosting her daughter's wedding on my property, with 100 guests already drinking champagne on my deck. The smell of diesel from catering trucks mixed with pine needles as I sat there, stunned. My father's American flag was gone, replaced by white wedding ribbons. Strangers were laughing where Dad and I used to sit and watch sunrise over the water. Delilah strutted over in designer heels, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Marcus, perfect timing. The bride's photos start in an hour." "This is private property," I said, voice cracking. "My property." She actually laughed. "Honey, your daddy's debts don't die with him. This venue rental covers what he owed the HOA. I was holding Dad's urn in my truck, and this woman was stealing his final resting place. What would you do? Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Marcus Caldwell, and 3 months ago, I lost the last family I had left. Dad Harold Caldwell died of a heart attack at 74, leaving me his mountain cabin and a Purple Heart from Vietnam. My wife Sarah passed from cancer 2 years ago, so that cabin represented everything I had left of family. The property sits on 2.5 acres of Colorado wilderness, 45 minutes up a winding dirt road from Millbrook. Grandpa built it in 1982 with his own hand-solid pine logs, stone fireplace, wraparound deck overlooking Pine Ridge Lake. You can smell the wood smoke from the chimney mixing with mountain air, hear your boots crunch on pine needles as you walk to the water. Every weekend, Dad and I would drive up there to fish, fix things, and pretend the world made sense. Here's the thing about property law that most people don't realize, and I learned this the hard way during my engineering career. If your property existed before an HOA formed, you typically can't be forced to join. It's called grandfathering, and it's supposed to protect existing landowners from retroactive rules. Our cabin was built in 1982, but Millbrook Mountain Estates HOA wasn't formed until 1995. We never joined, never paid dues, never signed their covenants. That should have been the end of it. Enter Delilah Thornfield, a woman who probably irons her jeans and alphabetizes her spice rack. Mid-50s, blonde hair that defies gravity and wind, drives a white Range Rover with vanity plates reading HOA Pres. She's married to Richard Thornfield, president of Millbrook Community Bank, and she treats the HOA presidency like she's running a small dictatorship. Picture someone who measures neighbors' grass with an actual ruler, then writes violation notices in perfect cursive. She'd been hassling Dad for years about increasingly ridiculous stuff. His dock was 6 inches beyond regulation length. His American flag was faded and unsightly. His backup generator was creating noise pollution during winter power outages. Dad started getting these official-looking letters every few weeks, demands for compliance with rules he never agreed to follow. Looking back, I realized the harassment was systematic. They were wearing him down, isolating him, making him feel like he was wrong for defending his own property rights. The morning I found the wedding setup, my hands were shaking as I held Dad's urn in my truck. I'd driven up to scatter his ashes from our dock at sunset, the way he'd asked. Instead, I found our gate cut open and strangers everywhere, transforming his sanctuary into some Pinterest-perfect wedding venue. White catering trucks clogged our narrow driveway. Workers were hanging lights across Dad's workshop, setting up a wedding arch on his sacred fishing dock. The American flag he'd flown every day since Vietnam gone, replaced by flowing white fabric and Chelsea and Brad Forever banners that probably cost more than Dad's monthly Social Security check. That's when Delilah appeared, strutting across the gravel in designer heels like she owned the place. The sound of her footsteps on our driveway made my teeth clench. "Marcus, perfect timing. I was just telling the photographer about the best sunset angles." My voice came out rough. "What the hell is going on here?" She tilted her head with that fake sympathy people use on grieving widowers. "Oh, honey, didn't anyone call you? The HOA board voted to designate this property as emergency community venue space. Your father missed several important meetings where this was discussed." "My father what? This is private property. We're not even in your HOA." Delilah pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "I'm afraid that's not quite accurate anymore. Your father accumulated significant debts to the community. Unpaid assessments, violation fines, emergency maintenance costs. This wedding venue rental helps offset what he owes." I stared at her, holding my father's ashes, watching strangers celebrate where we'd planned his final goodbye. "How much does he supposedly owe?" Her smile could have frozen the lake. Just over $18,000, but don't worry, after this weekend we'll call it even. $18,000. The number hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Dad's entire estate was worth maybe 40 grand, and this woman was claiming he owed nearly half of it to an HOA he never joined. That's impossible, I said, still clutching his urn. Show me the documentation. Delilah's smile widened as she flipped through her folder with the enthusiasm of a shark smelling blood. Oh, we have everything properly documented. Unpaid annual assessments going back 3 years, violation fines for noncompliance, emergency road maintenance costs, legal fees for enforcement actions. She pulled out a stack of papers. Your father was quite the rebel, ignoring our certified letters. I grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. Every document looked official letterhead, case numbers, even what appeared to be court stamps. But something felt wrong. The dates were all recent, mostly from the past 6 months when Dad was already sick and confused. I need copies of everything, I said, and I want to see the original HOA covenants that supposedly give you authority over my property. Of course, honey, but right now we have a wedding to finish setting up. The bride's family flew in from California. Delilah gestured toward the lake where a dozen workers were assembling what looked like a $5,000 flower arch. Chelsea's been planning this day for 2 years. That's when the first mini-twist hit me. I noticed something in the corner of one document, a small print notation that said Millbrook County Superior Court, case number 2024 CV 1847. If this was real court documentation, there would be a public record. My engineering background taught me to verify everything, especially when the math doesn't add up. I'll be back, I said, pocketing the papers. Don't touch anything else until I return. Delilah's laugh followed me to my truck. Take your time, sweetie. We'll be here all weekend. The drive to Millbrook County Courthouse took 20 minutes of white-knuckle turns down the mountain. My hands were shaking, not from grief anymore, but from pure rage. The smell of pine gave way to dusty courthouse air as I rushed inside, Dad's papers clutched in my sweaty palm. The county clerk, a tired-looking woman named Janet Morrison, barely looked up when I approached her window. Help you? I need to verify some court documents. Case number 2024 CV 1847, she typed slowly, squinting at her computer screen. That's odd. What's odd? This case number doesn't exist in our system, never has. She looked at the papers I handed her. These look official, but they're not from our court. See this seal? It's close, but the county name is misspelled. Says Millbrook County instead of Millbrook County. Classic forgery attempt. My stomach dropped. Not because the documents were fake, I'd suspected that, but because it meant Delilah and her crew were running a sophisticated con game, and my grieving father had been their target. Janet leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know, you're the third person this month asking about fake documents from that mountain HOA area. We've been seeing a pattern. What kind of pattern? Elderly property owners getting hit with sudden massive assessments, usually right after a family death or medical emergency. The documentation always looks professional, but it's all fabricated. She pulled out a file folder. I've been keeping track because something stinks up there. This was exactly the kind of information I needed. Back in my engineering days, I'd learned that scammers always follow the same playbook: target vulnerable people during crisis moments, use official-looking paperwork, and demand immediate payment to avoid legal consequences. I asked Janet to print everything she had on the other cases. Turned out, 6 families in the past 2 years had been hit with similar sudden assessments, ranging from $12,000 to $25,000. All elderly homeowners, all targeted within months of a spouse's death or major medical bills. The drive back up the mountain felt different this time. Instead of grief and confusion, I had cold, calculating anger. These people weren't just stealing my father's property, they were running a systematic elder abuse scam, using fake legal documents to terrorize grieving families. When I got back to the cabin, the wedding setup was in full swing. Chelsea herself was there now, a 20-something blonde in designer jeans, directing photographers around her venue. She saw me approaching and actually waved. You must be Marcus. Mom told me you're being so gracious about sharing this gorgeous space. Thank you so much. I looked at this kid, probably a decent person who had no idea her mother was a criminal, and felt a stab of sympathy. Then I looked at Delilah, who was watching me with calculating eyes, and the sympathy evaporated. Delilah, I called out, we need to talk, privately. She sauntered over, confidence radiating from every step. Find everything in order with the paperwork? Oh, I found exactly what I was looking for. I pulled out Janet's printouts. Turns out case number 2024 CV 1447 doesn't exist. Neither do any of these other court cases you're claiming. For just a second, Delilah's mask slipped. I saw calculation, then panic, then cold determination. I think you're mistaken, honey. Court systems can be confusing for civilians. Delilah's recovery was impressive. I'll give her that. Within seconds, her mask of concerned neighbor slipped right back into place. Court systems can be overwhelming, Marcus. Sometimes records take time to update in their computers. But I'd caught that flash of panic in her eyes. That momentary crack in her perfect facade told me everything I needed to know. This woman was a predator, and she'd been hunting my father while he was weak and alone. Right, I said, playing along. Maybe I should call the sheriff and have them help sort this out. Oh, that won't be necessary, Delilah's voice pitched slightly higher. Let's not involve law enforcement in what's clearly a simple paperwork mix-up. Besides, you wouldn't want to ruin Chelsea's special day over a misunderstanding. There it was, the manipulation tactic. Make me the bad guy for defending my own property. Classic predator behavior. Isolate the victim, make them doubt themselves, then play on their emotions. I'd seen this exact pattern when my engineering firm investigated insurance fraud cases. You know what? I said. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't want to ruin anyone's wedding. I pulled out my phone. So I'll just call my attorney instead. Have him sort through all this paperwork properly. The mini twist came when Delilah's entire demeanor shifted again. This time, she dropped the sweet neighbor act completely. Marcus, let's be realistic here. Your father was a sick old man who let this property fall into disrepair. The HOA has been carrying the burden of maintaining shared resources, roads, utilities, emergency services, while he freeloaded for years. Her voice turned ice cold. We're offering you a generous settlement. Take it. Or what? Or you'll find yourself fighting a very expensive legal battle you can't afford to win. Do you know how much it costs to hire attorneys who specialize in HOA law? Tens of thousands. Do you know how long these cases drag through court? Years. She stepped closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the mountain air. Meanwhile, you'll be paying ongoing legal fees, court costs, and accumulating interest on the original debt. This was the threat I'd been waiting for, the moment when predators show their true nature. I kept my phone recording in my pocket, capturing every word. What makes you think you have any legal authority over my property at all? Delilah's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Honey, your grandfather's original deed is from 1982. Our HOA covenants were filed in 1995. But what you probably don't know is that in 1987, there was a boundary survey dispute that resulted in a court-ordered easement modification. That easement gave the community certain rights over what you think is your private property. She was lying. I knew she was lying, but the confidence in her voice was designed to make me doubt myself. This is how they'd broken down my father layer after layer of official-sounding legal threats that would cost a fortune to disprove. Show me that easement modification. It's recorded at the county level, but accessing those records requires proper legal channels, which brings us back to attorneys and court costs. Delilah pulled out her phone. Or you could be reasonable. Let us finish this weekend, consider the debt settled, and everyone walks away happy. That's when Chelsea bounded over, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between her mother and me. Mom, the caterers want to know about the evening lighting setup. Should they use the big generator or just the battery packs? Use whatever you need, sweetheart. Marcus was just telling me how happy he is to help make your day perfect. I looked at this innocent kid, excited about her wedding, and realized she had no idea her mother was using her special day as cover for extortion. The whole wedding was probably legitimate, but Delilah was leveraging it as emotional blackmail. Actually, Chelsea, I said carefully, I think there might be some confusion about the venue booking. Delilah's hand shot out and gripped my arm. Marcus, could I speak with you privately for just one moment? She pulled me aside, near Dad's old workshop where the sound of power tools from the wedding setup would mask our conversation. When she spoke, her voice was pure venom. Listen very carefully. Your father signed an agreement before he died, a private settlement to avoid public embarrassment about his debts. If you force this into court, I'll make sure every newspaper in Colorado knows that Harold Caldwell was a deadbeat who tried to cheat his neighbors out of thousands of dollars. The rage that hit me was like a physical force. She wasn't just stealing property, she was threatening to destroy my father's reputation. A Vietnam veteran who'd worked construction for 40 years, paid his taxes, and never hurt anyone. "You're going to regret threatening my father's memory." Delilah's smile was pure poison. "Am I? Because from where I stand, you're one grieving son against an entire community board, multiple legal documents, and established precedent. Good luck with that fight." She turned and walked back toward the wedding setup, leaving me standing alone next to Dad's workshop with my hands clenched into fists. That night, I drove back to my hotel in Millbrook with my head spinning and my phone full of recorded conversations. Delilah's threat about destroying Dad's reputation kept echoing in my ears, but something else was bothering me too. Her comment about the 1987 boundary survey, it was too specific to be completely made up. I spent the evening on my laptop in the cramped hotel room, searching property records online. The smell of stale coffee from the lobby mixed with my growing frustration as I dug through decades of legal documents. That's when I found it. There really was a boundary dispute in 1987, but when I read the actual court resolution, my blood ran cold. The dispute wasn't about easements or community rights. It was about Grandpa Harold Caldwell Sr. fighting to keep a mining company from claiming mineral rights under his property. He'd won that fight, and the court had specifically reinforced his property boundaries and rights. Delilah had twisted a victory into a threat, counting on me not to check the actual records. This woman was more dangerous than I'd realized. She wasn't just running simple HOA fraud, she was sophisticated enough to research property histories and weaponize partial truths. My engineering background had taught me that the most dangerous lies always contain just enough truth to sound credible. I called my late wife's brother Jake in Phoenix. He's a real estate attorney, and Sarah always said he was the smartest person she knew. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and terrifying. "Marcus, get out of there now. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and document everything you can. What you're describing sounds like organized elder abuse, possibly with banking connections." His voice was deadly serious. "These people don't just steal property, they destroy lives. If they targeted your father systematically, they've done it to others." Jake explained something that made my stomach drop. In Colorado, there's a legal concept called quiet title actions, where scammers can actually steal property by filing fake liens and then claiming abandonment when the owner doesn't respond properly. If someone's sick, isolated, or grieving, they might miss critical deadlines and lose everything. The mini twist came the next morning when I returned to the cabin. The wedding was in full swing. Chelsea looked beautiful in her white dress. Guests were laughing and toasting by the lake, and everything seemed perfectly normal, except for the black sedan parked behind the catering trucks with government plates. I approached cautiously and saw a man in a cheap suit talking intensely with Richard Thornfield, Delilah's bank president husband. The man had that unmistakable look of law enforcement, rigid posture, alert eyes, and a badge clipped to his belt that I could just make out under his jacket. But here's the thing that made my blood freeze. Richard looked terrified. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and he kept glancing around like he wanted to run. This wasn't a friendly chat with local police about wedding permits. I ducked behind Dad's workshop and used my phone to zoom in on the badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI was already here, already investigating something connected to the Thornfields, which meant this wasn't just local HOA corruption, this was federal-level fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Agent Sarah Olivia, FBI. We need to talk. Meet me at the Millbrook Diner in 1 hour. Come alone." The next hour felt like the longest of my life. I sat in that small-town diner, nursing burnt coffee and watching the clock, wondering if I was walking into some kind of trap. When Agent Olivia walked in, mid-30s, professional, with the kind of calm confidence that comes from dealing with serious criminals, I knew this was real. "Mr. Caldwell, we've been investigating financial fraud in this county for 8 months. Your complaint yesterday about forged court documents fits a pattern we've been tracking." She slid a manila folder across the table. "Your father contacted us 2 weeks before he died." The folder contained photocopies of emails Dad had sent to the FBI field office in Denver. Page after page of harassment documentation, threats, fake legal notices, and his own handwritten notes about feeling hunted by the HOA. His final email, sent 3 days before his heart attack, said, "They're going to take everything. Please don't let them hurt Marcus too." Agent Olivia leaned forward. Harold was going to be our key witness in a federal case against an organized fraud ring. We believe his death might have been caused by the stress of ongoing intimidation. Her voice softened. I'm sorry for your loss, but we need your help to finish what your father started. She explained that Richard Thornfield's bank was under investigation for mortgage fraud, money laundering, and elder abuse. The HOA scam was just one piece of a larger criminal enterprise that had stolen millions from vulnerable homeowners across 3 counties. How many families? I asked. So far, 47 confirmed victims. Total losses exceeding $4.2 million. Agent Olivia's jaw tightened. Your father died trying to stop them. Will you help us finish the job? Agent Olivia opened a second folder that made my hands shake. Inside were bank records, wire transfers, and property deeds showing a pattern so systematic it took my breath away. The Thornfields weren't just running HOA fraud, they were operating a full-scale criminal enterprise that had been stealing from elderly homeowners for over 3 years. Your father stumbled onto something much bigger than HOA harassment, Agent Olivia explained, spreading documents across the diner table. Richard Thornfield's bank was approving fraudulent loans against properties with fabricated liens. Then the HOA would force sheriff sales, and shell companies connected to the Thornfields would buy the properties for pennies on the dollar. The numbers were staggering. 47 families had lost their homes. Total theft exceeded $4 million. Properties worth $300,000 were being sold for $50,000 after fake emergency assessments forced desperate owners into foreclosure. But here's what made me physically sick. They specifically targeted families dealing with death, illness, or divorce. Grieving widows, veterans with PTSD, elderly couples facing medical bankruptcy. The most vulnerable people in the community, when they were least able to fight back. How did Dad figure this out? Agent Olivia pulled out a recording device. He wore a wire to his final HOA meeting. Listen to this. Dad's voice filled the diner, shakier than I remembered, but still strong. I know what you people are doing. The Morrison family, the Blackwoods, Tom Bradley, you're stealing from people who can't defend themselves. Delilah's voice responded with icy calm. Harold, you're confused. These are legitimate community assessments for property maintenance and legal compliance. Bullshit. I checked the county records. Half these liens are fabricated and the other half are inflated by 300%. You're running a goddamn criminal enterprise. Richard Thornfield's voice joined in. Mr. Caldwell, I think your recent health issues might be affecting your judgment. Perhaps it's time to consider selling your property and moving somewhere with better medical care. That was a threat. Clear as day. They were telling my dying father to give up his property or face escalating harassment. The stress from this confrontation probably triggered the heart attack that killed him 3 days later. Agent Olivia turned off the recording. Harold agreed to help us build a federal case. We were planning to serve warrants next month, but... She gestured helplessly. But Dad died before he could testify. Exactly. Which is why we need you. The wedding venue scam you're dealing with, it's perfect cover for us to observe their operation in action. Every conversation, every forged document, every threatening statement, it's all evidence we can use to destroy this entire organization. She explained that the FBI had been building a RICO Case Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. When criminals work together systematically, federal law treats them as organized crime. Instead of simple fraud charges, they'd face decades in prison and complete asset forfeiture. What do you need me to do? Let the wedding proceed, but document everything. We'll provide you with recording equipment. Act defeated, like they've broken you. Get them talking about their process, their other victims, their future plans. Agent Olivia's eyes hardened. Make them think they've won. The midpoint twist that changed everything. Dad hadn't died as a broken old man being victimized by bullies. He'd died as a federal informant, fighting organized crime, a Vietnam veteran who'd spent his final weeks gathering evidence to protect other families from the same fate. There's something else, Agent Olivia said quietly. We found evidence that they've been planning to expand statewide. Delilah's been recruited to train other HOA boards in their enforcement techniques. If we don't stop them now, hundreds more families will lose everything. I thought about Dad's Purple Heart sitting in my truck, about his final email begging the FBI to protect me, about 47 families who'd already lost their homes to these predators. What kind of recording equipment are we talking about? Agent Olivia smiled for the first time since we'd started talking. The kind that's going to put these criminals away for the rest of their lives. When I drove back up the mountain toward the cabin, everything looked different. The wedding reception was winding down, guests were laughing and dancing on my deck, and Delilah was holding court like the queen of the mountain. She had no idea that her entire criminal empire was about to come crashing down. The FBI field office in Denver looked like every government building I'd ever seen. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and the faint smell of industrial coffee. But sitting in that conference room with Agent Olivia, her partner Agent Rodriguez, and Jake flying in from Phoenix, I felt like I was joining something bigger than revenge. This was justice. "First things first," Agent Olivia said, sliding a small device across the table. "This goes under your shirt, transmits everything within a 50-foot radius. Battery lasts 12 hours, and it's completely undetectable unless someone physically searches you." Jake leaned forward, studying the legal documents we'd spread across the table. "Marcus, what we're building here isn't just a fraud case. Under Colorado law, when criminals coordinate systematically to steal property, it becomes racketeering. These people aren't just facing fines, they're looking at federal prison sentences of 15 to 20 years. The key insight that changed my entire perspective: organized crime isn't just mobsters in movies. It's any group of people working together to commit multiple crimes for profit. Delilah's HOA board, Richard's bank, corrupt local officials. They'd created a criminal enterprise that federal law treats as seriously as drug cartels or money laundering operations. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a whiteboard and started mapping connections. Richard Thornfield's bank provides fraudulent loans. Delilah's HOA creates fake liens. Bob Hartley's insurance company undervalues properties. Patricia Mills handles forged documentation. Deputy Rodriguez, no relation to me, delays police response when victims call for help. Looking at that web of corruption, I realized my father had been fighting an entire system designed to steal from vulnerable people. No wonder the stress killed him. But he'd also done something incredible. He'd gathered enough evidence to bring the whole thing down. "What about the other victims?" I asked. Agent Olivia opened another file. "We've been quietly contacting families who lost property. Turns out most of them saved documentation because something felt wrong. Agnes Blackwood kept every threatening letter. Tom Bradley recorded phone calls. Mrs. Kowalski photographed HOA board members surveying her property without permission. The evidence collection had been happening for months, and I'd had no idea. Dad's death had actually accelerated the investigation because it gave the FBI probable cause to examine all the related financial transactions. Every fake lien, every forced sale, every inflated assessment, it was all documented in federal databases." Jake explained the legal strategy. "We're not just going after individuals. We're targeting their entire financial network. Under asset forfeiture laws, anything purchased with stolen money gets seized. Their houses, cars, bank accounts, investments, all of it goes to compensate victims." The technical setup was more sophisticated than I'd expected. The FBI had been monitoring Richard Thornfield's bank communications for weeks. They knew about offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell companies in Delaware, and real estate investments across 3 states. This wasn't small-town corruption. This was organized crime with international connections. "Your job," Agent Olivia said, "is to get them talking about their process. How they select targets, how they fabricate documents, how they coordinate the property seizures. Act defeated and curious. Make them think you're impressed by their system." The psychological preparation was the hardest part. I had to convince myself to act broken when every instinct screamed to fight back. Jake coached me through it. "Remember, your father spent his final weeks pretending to be weak while gathering evidence. You're honoring his memory by finishing what he started." We practiced scenarios where Delilah would try to intimidate me, where Richard would offer fake sympathy, where the HOA board would attempt to pressure me into signing documents. Each conversation was an opportunity to gather evidence that would destroy their entire operation. The community network was bigger than I'd realized. Mrs. Kowalski had connected with Agnes Blackwood and Tom Bradley. They'd been meeting secretly, comparing stories and documenting patterns. When Agent Olivia contacted them, they'd already built a victim support group with detailed records spanning 3 years. "The beautiful thing about criminals," Agent Rodriguez said with a grim smile, "is that they always get overconfident. They'll brag about their success, explain their methods, and assume you're too broken to fight back. That arrogance is what's going to put them in federal prison. The timeline was tight. The wedding reception would end tomorrow, but Delilah had scheduled a community celebration for next weekend, where she planned to showcase her successful mediation with me. Local officials, other HOA presidents, and potential new victims would all be there to witness her triumph. Perfect setup for the biggest public humiliation in Millbrook County history. As we finished planning, Agent Olivia handed me a business card. Your father would be proud. He spent his final weeks fighting for justice, and now you're going to deliver it. Driving back up the mountain, I could smell pine needles and wood smoke again, but this time they smelled like victory. Dad's cabin wasn't just my inheritance anymore. It was ground zero for taking down a criminal empire. Delilah Thornfield had no idea that her perfect crime was about to become her perfect downfall. The next morning, I returned to the cabin wearing the FBI wire and carrying a gift basket like some defeated neighbor trying to make peace. The taste of bile filled my mouth as I practiced my submissive act, but I kept thinking about Dad's voice on that recording, brave, defiant fighting until the end. Chelsea was packing up wedding decorations when I arrived, still glowing from her perfect day. She had no idea her dream wedding had been funded by stolen money and used as cover for extortion. Marcus, thank you so much for being flexible about the venue. It was absolutely magical. She hugged me like we were old friends. Mom said you two worked everything out. Your mother is very persuasive, I said, loud enough for the wire to pick up clearly. Delilah emerged from the cabin wearing designer jeans and that predatory smile I was learning to hate. Marcus, what a lovely surprise. I thought you'd left town. I brought this as a peace offering. I held up the gift basket, which contained expensive wine, local honey, and a hidden FBI camera. I wanted to apologize for being difficult yesterday. I think I understand how things work now. The mini twist came when Delilah invited me inside for coffee. Dad's cabin, transformed into their temporary command center, was filled with paperwork, laptops, and what looked like a full-scale property management operation. This wasn't just about my family's cabin. This was their headquarters for systematic theft. You know, Marcus, Delilah said, pouring coffee from Dad's own pot, your father was stubborn, but he wasn't stupid. He eventually realized that fighting the community only hurts everyone involved. How do you mean? Patricia Mills looked up from a laptop where she was typing official-looking documents. Harold signed the settlement agreement 2 days before he died. He finally understood that cooperation benefits everyone. My hands clenched around the coffee mug. They were claiming Dad had surrendered, that he'd given up fighting before his death. It was a lie designed to break my spirit, but knowing it was false just made me more determined to expose them. Can I see that settlement agreement? Bob Hartley, the insurance agent, chuckled from his spot at Dad's kitchen table. You're looking at it, son. This weekend's venue rental was the settlement. Your father agreed to let the community use the property to offset his debts. The sophistication of their lies was impressive and terrifying. They'd constructed an entire false narrative where Dad had willingly agreed to give up his property rights. If I hadn't seen the FBI evidence, I might have believed them. I guess I don't understand how the debt got so high, I said, playing confused and defeated. $18,000 seems like a lot for an HOA. Delilah's eyes lit up with the opportunity to explain her successful system. Oh, honey, it accumulates faster than you'd think. Annual assessments, violation fines, legal fees for enforcement actions, emergency maintenance costs for shared infrastructure. She walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder with my father's name on it. Harold's violations started small grass too long, fence 6 inches over regulation height, generator noise complaints. But when you ignore HOA notices, the fines compound quickly. Richard Thornfield arrived while she was talking, carrying a briefcase and looking pleased with himself. Marcus, good to see you being reasonable about this situation. I'm trying to understand how it all works, I said. It seems like you've developed a really effective system for handling difficult property owners. That was the opening they'd been waiting for. Over the next 30 minutes, they proudly explained their entire criminal operation while the FBI wire recorded every word. Richard described how his bank provided bridge financing for property owners facing sudden assessments. Bob explained how property appraisals could be adjusted based on compliance issues and community standing. Patricia detailed the legal documentation process for liens and foreclosure proceedings. But Delilah's explanation was the most damning. She described their targeting strategy with the enthusiasm of a sales presentation. We focus on properties with elderly owners, recent deaths in the family, or medical financial stress. People in crisis situations are more likely to settle quickly rather than fight prolonged legal battles. How many families have you helped this way? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Oh, we've resolved disputes with dozens of property owners over the past few years, Delilah beamed. The key is being firm but fair. Most people eventually realize that cooperation serves everyone's interests. She pulled out a 3-ring binder filled with before and after photos of properties they'd helped resolve. My stomach turned as I recognized several cabins and homes I'd seen driving through the area. Each photo represented a family destroyed, elderly people driven from their homes, life savings stolen through fabricated legal threats. "This is really impressive," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "You've built quite an operation here." Richard clapped me on the shoulder. "Smart men recognize when they're outmatched, Marcus. Your father fought longer than most, but he came around eventually." The Wire captured everything: their admissions of targeting vulnerable families, their systematic property theft, their coordination between bank and HOA, and their complete lack of remorse for destroying lives. 2 days later, Delilah called with news that made my skin crawl. "Marcus, I have wonderful news. The Millbrook Community Center has agreed to host a public celebration of our successful mediation. Local officials want to see how effective HOA dispute resolution can be." She was planning a victory parade, a public humiliation where I'd apologize for misunderstanding HOA authority while she demonstrated her innovative enforcement techniques to other board presidents from across Colorado. "That sounds great," I managed to say into the phone, while Agent Olivia listened on the other line. "When is this happening?" "Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock. I've invited Mayor Peterson, the city council, several bank officials, and HOA presidents from neighboring communities." "Oh, and a reporter from the Millbrook Gazette." Delilah's voice practically vibrated with excitement. "This could be a model for property dispute resolution statewide." The mini twist that chilled my blood: she wasn't just stealing from local families anymore. She was preparing to export her criminal system across Colorado, training other HOA boards in systematic elder abuse. If we didn't stop her this weekend, hundreds more families would lose everything. After hanging up, Agent Olivia's expression was grim. "This is bigger than we thought. She's positioning herself for the state HOA Board of Directors. If she gets that platform, this fraud scheme goes statewide within 6 months." The FBI surveillance had uncovered even more horrifying details. Richard Thornfield's bank had correspondent relationships with financial institutions in 12 states. The shell companies purchasing stolen properties had connections to organized crime families in Denver and Las Vegas. What started as small-town HOA corruption had tentacles reaching into major criminal networks. "How many more victims are we talking about?" I asked. Agent Rodriguez pulled out updated files. "Based on their expansion timeline, conservative estimate is 400 families over the next 2 years, potential theft exceeding $20 million. My father hadn't just stumbled onto local corruption, he'd discovered the beta test for a criminal franchise operation. Delilah was the proof of concept, and now they were ready to scale nationwide. The community celebration setup was more elaborate than I'd expected. Delilah had rented professional lighting, hired a photographer, and even arranged for live streaming to social media. She wanted maximum publicity for her successful mediation model. "I'll need you to give a short speech," she explained during our rehearsal meeting at the community center. "Just explain how cooperation and mutual respect resolved our dispute. Emphasize how much you learned about proper HOA procedures." The taste of humiliation was bitter in my mouth, but I kept thinking about Dad's recording where he'd called them out as criminals. "What should I say exactly?" Patricia Mills handed me a typed script. "We've prepared some talking points. Just stick to these themes: community cooperation, proper legal procedures, and the benefits of experienced HOA leadership." Reading that script felt like swallowing poison. Every line was designed to legitimize their criminal system and encourage other victims to surrender without fighting. But it was also perfect evidence of their organized conspiracy to defraud homeowners. Bob Hartley was setting up a display booth showing before and after photos of properties they'd helped improve through proper enforcement. Each photo represented a family they'd destroyed, but he presented them like success stories in home renovation. "The key," Bob explained to an imaginary audience, "is consistent enforcement of community standards. When property owners understand the consequences of non-compliance, they usually choose cooperation. Richard Thornfield arrived with a stack of promotional materials for his bank. Community partnerships like this demonstrate how financial institutions can support neighborhood stability, he practiced saying. Millbrook Community Bank is proud to provide resources for effective property management. The casual way they discussed their crimes was staggering. They'd convinced themselves they were community leaders solving problems, not criminals destroying lives. The self-deception was so complete that they felt comfortable bragging about their methods to anyone who'd listen. "Marcus," Delilah said, "I want you to meet someone special." She introduced me to a woman in her 50s with calculating eyes. "This is Janet Worthington, president of the Colorado HOA Association. She's very interested in our mediation techniques." Janet shook my hand with the grip of someone used to getting her way. "Delilah tells me you've learned to appreciate the value of strong community leadership. I'd love to hear your perspective on effective dispute resolution." This was it, the moment when their local crime operation became a statewide threat. Janet Worthington had the power to train thousands of HOA boards across Colorado in Delilah's theft techniques. "I'm definitely looking forward to sharing my experience," I said, wondering if the wire was picking up my racing heartbeat. Agent Olivia had positioned FBI surveillance throughout the community center. Local media thought they were covering a feel-good story about neighbor cooperation. City officials expected to witness innovative community leadership. Instead, they were about to see the largest organized crime takedown in Millbrook County history. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday afternoon arrived with crisp mountain air and the kind of blue sky that made everything look picture-perfect. The Millbrook Community Center buzzed with over 200 people, mayor, city council, bank officials, HOA presidents from 6 counties, and local media ready to document Delilah's innovative mediation success. I sat in the front row wearing Dad's Purple Heart pin and enough recording equipment to power a small radio station. My hands were steady now, my voice calm. 3 months of grief had crystallized into cold, focused rage. Delilah took the podium like she was accepting an Oscar, blonde hair, perfectly styled, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than most families' monthly mortgage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to witness the future of HOA dispute resolution." She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation titled Community Leadership Through Effective Enforcement. Each slide detailed her systematic approach: property assessment, violation documentation, escalating penalties, and cooperative settlements that avoided expensive legal battles. "The key," she explained to the impressed audience, "is identifying properties with vulnerable owners early in the process. Elderly residents, recent widows, families facing medical expenses. These situations require special sensitivity and accelerated intervention." Every word was being recorded by FBI equipment and broadcast live on social media. She was confessing to systematic elder abuse in front of 200 witnesses. Richard Thornfield joined her at the podium, radiating banker confidence. Millbrook Community Bank is proud to support these community partnerships. Our specialized lien financing programs help property owners resolve disputes quickly while protecting neighborhood stability. Mayor Peterson nodded approvingly from the front row. This kind of innovative problem-solving is exactly what our community needs. Then came my moment, and came. Delilah called me to the podium with a triumphant smile. "I'd like you to meet Marcus Caldwell, whose family property was at the center of our most recent successful mediation." The walk to that microphone felt like the longest 20 feet of my life. 200 faces looked up at me expectantly, including Janet Worthington from the State HOA Association, who was taking notes for statewide implementation. I adjusted the microphone and looked directly into the camera that Lucy Olivia from the Millbrook Gazette was using for live streaming. "Thank you, Delilah. I do have a few things to say about your mediation process." I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. "Let me start by playing some recordings from yesterday's planning meeting." The color drained from Delilah's face as her own voice filled the community center. "We focus on properties with elderly owners, recent deaths in the family, or medical financial stress. People in crisis situations are more likely to settle quickly rather than fight prolonged legal battles." The audience stirred uncomfortably. Mayor Peterson frowned. Janet Worthington stopped taking notes. "That's just," Delilah started, but I held up my hand. "Oh, there's more." I played Patricia Mills explaining their document fabrication process, Bob Hartley describing property appraisal manipulation, and Richard Thornfield discussing offshore bank accounts. The community center went dead silent except for the sound of cell phones recording everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying across the room like thunder, "you've just heard confessions to federal crimes: mail fraud, wire fraud, elder abuse, and racketeering." That's when Agent Olivia stood up from her seat in the back row, FBI badge gleaming under the community center lights. "Marcus is correct. This is Agent Sarah Olivia, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The room erupted. 6 more FBI agents emerged from positions throughout the audience. Richard Thornfield tried to bolt for the exit but ran straight into Agent Rodriguez. Patricia Mills fainted dead away. Bob Hartley demanded his lawyer. But Delilah just stood there, frozen at the podium, watching her perfect crime become her perfect downfall. I took the microphone back. "My name is Marcus Caldwell. My father Harold died 3 months ago while fighting the systematic harassment you just heard described. These people stole my family's cabin using forged court documents and fabricated liens. The FBI agents were reading Miranda rights while local TV cameras captured everything. Lucy Olivia's live stream had already been shared thousands of times across social media. Harold Caldwell was a Vietnam veteran who earned a Purple Heart defending democracy overseas," I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "He spent his final weeks as a federal informant, gathering evidence to protect other families from the same theft these criminals inflicted on dozens of elderly homeowners." I held up Dad's Purple Heart so the cameras could see it clearly. This investigation uncovered 47 victims, over $4 million in stolen property, and a criminal enterprise that was preparing to expand statewide. The crowd erupted in applause as Agent Olivia led Delilah away in handcuffs. Mayor Peterson was shaking his head in stunned disbelief. Janet Worthington was frantically deleting notes from her phone. "Dad," I whispered, looking up at the community center ceiling, "justice served." The mic drop moment came when Delilah, halfway to the FBI van, turned back and screamed, "You have no idea what you've just destroyed." I smiled and spoke directly into the live stream camera. "Ma'am, I destroyed exactly what needed destroying, a criminal enterprise that preyed on grieving families. Next time, maybe try reading actual law instead of making it up." The courtroom in Denver Federal Courthouse was packed 6 months later when Judge Patricia Morrison read the sentences. The smell of old wood and justice filled the air as Delilah Thornfield, once the queen of Millbrook Mountain, stood in orange prison jumpsuit with shackled hands. "Delilah Thornfield, you are hereby sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release, and ordered to pay $2.1 million in restitution to your victims." Richard Thornfield got 25 years and permanent forfeiture of all assets. Patricia Mills received 8 years and a lifetime ban from any HOA position. Bob Hartley got 12 years and lost his insurance license forever. The corrupt deputy got 5 years and lost his pension. But the real victory came in the weeks following their arrests. Federal asset forfeiture laws meant everything they'd bought with stolen money got seized and redistributed to victims. Agnes Blackwood got her cabin back plus $50,000 in compensation. Tom Bradley's fraudulent liens were voided, and he received a settlement that covered his legal costs and then some. 31 families recovered properties worth over $4 million combined. I drove up to Dad's cabin the day after the sentencing, carrying a bottle of his favorite whiskey and feeling lighter than I had in years. The autumn air smelled like wood smoke and victory as I sat on the deck where Delilah had once held court like a feudal lord. The Harold Caldwell Memorial Fund had raised over $500,000 in its first year, providing free legal aid to elderly homeowners facing HOA abuse across 3 states. We'd partnered with AARP, state attorney general offices, and legal aid societies to create a nationwide network of fraud prevention resources. The best part? Colorado passed Harold's Law requiring all HOA liens to be verified by independent attorneys before filing. 8 other states were considering similar legislation. Dad's final fight had protected thousands of future families from the same theft we'd endured. I wasn't alone anymore either. Elena Rodriguez, Deputy Williams' sister and a retired teacher, had lost her parents' New Mexico property to a similar scam 3 years earlier. We'd bonded over our shared mission to protect elderly homeowners, and she'd become my partner in both the foundation work and life. Dad's cabin had become a gathering place for fraud survivors, a sanctuary where broken families could heal and plan their fights for justice. The environmental victory felt just as important as the legal one. I donated a conservation easement on the lakefront property, ensuring Pine Ridge Lake would remain pristine for future generations. The Harold Caldwell Memorial Nature Preserve hosted its first annual conservation festival last month, drawing over 2,000 visitors who learned about protecting both natural resources and property rights. But the work wasn't finished. Just last week, I got a call from a widow in Oregon whose HOA was using fake patriotic language to steal from military families. They're claiming my husband's Purple Heart ceremony violated noise ordinances, she sobbed. The fines are up to $15,000. Same playbook, different state. Time to pack up the recording equipment again. As the sun set over the lake, painting the water gold and orange, I raised a glass of Dad's whiskey toward his memorial plaque. To the fighters who came before and the battles yet to come. The foundation had trained over 300 volunteers to recognize HOA fraud warning signs. We'd helped recover $12 million in stolen assets across 9 states. Congressional hearings on HOA reform were scheduled for next spring, with Elena and me invited to testify about systematic elder abuse. Most importantly, we'd proven that when good people stand together against corruption, justice doesn't just win, it multiplies. Every family we helped became advocates for others. Every criminal we exposed prevented dozens of future victims. Looking across the peaceful lake where Dad taught me to fish, I felt his presence in the mountain air. He'd died fighting for justice, but his sacrifice had ignited a movement that was protecting families nationwide. The loons called across the water as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new criminals to expose, new families to protect. But tonight, justice reigned supreme over Pine Ridge Lake. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. You're not alone in this fight. Hit subscribe if you believe justice should always triumph over corruption. Ring that notification bell for more David versus Goliath victories where the good guys actually win. Remember, when bullies hide behind fake authority, truth and determination will always expose them. Your family legacy is worth fighting for.